After learning he has less than a year to live, a successful artist undergoes cryostasis. 70 years later, he awakens in a completely different world, unsure of his existence. In 2084, nurse Elizabeth Mansfra is finally accepted into the advanced medical facility called Prodigy Health Corporation as one of the assistants to the genius Dr. Victor West. Excited, Elizabeth walks into the facility with a secretary by her side as they pass by a hologram figure of Drive West. The image tells them about the man's dream of attaining the possible key to immortality with their program that can regenerate 65% of human organisms. Then, the secretary reminds the nurse that she's bound by her confidentiality contract regarding the project. Stepping into the laboratory, Elizabeth finally meets the quirky Drive West. The doctor takes the nurse on a tour of the massive facility, and introduces their ambitious project called Lazarus. After 4 years of experimental studies, the doctors are now at the peak of fully reanimating their test subject. Drive West showcases a hologram of Lazarus' body design, judging what to retain and what needs to be restructured with bionic parts. The group tasks Elizabeth to familiarize herself with the test subject within 4 weeks before the operation, since she'll be his designated caretaker. Then, the nurse asks for Lazarus' real name. Over 60 years in the past, Marc Jarvis quietly drives his car as he reminisces his childhood memories. He remembers playing in the driveway and tiredly collapsing in his parents' arms. Marc wonders why time seemed slow when he was young compared to how he views time as an adult. Stopping his car, Marc sits dazedly with the diagnostic test result hanging loosely in his hand, and makes his way to the hospital. At the doctor's office, the attending physician tells Marc about his impending demise as he's diagnosed with throat cancer and has a year to live. Devastated, the patient asks with a confused expression why he has such a disease when he's never smoked in his entire life. The doctor tries to comfort him by offering treatments such as chemotherapy to slow down the spread. Yet, Marc refuses and tells the physician that he needs more time to think it over. To prepare for his death, he sorts out his remaining projects to his employees and tells his good friends and colleagues of his situation, garnering varying reactions from shock, to confusion, to sadness. Later, the dying man faces his mother to tell her the harsh truth that she'll outlive him. Faced with such overwhelming fear, Marc begins to break down as he tosses away everything he owns, before getting lost at night in the middle of nowhere. Naomi finds Marc wandering at night, and hugs and comforts her lover. Later, they lie in bed, and Marc tells her to move on and reunite with her ex-lover, Steve. However, she refuses to leave his side, wanting to go through the difficult time with him. Days later, Marc has dinner with friends, when he opens up about the idea of undergoing cryostasis after finding an article about an experiment where scientists were able to create a functioning rat heart. However, his friends and lover see this as Marc's delusional attempt of coping with his critical illness. Ultimately, everyone mildly agrees with his decision to be supportive. In the present, the doctors work on Lazarus' vitals and serum levels before the much-awaited resurrection. In 2015, Charles expresses his doubts regarding Marc's plan for the cryo procedure, after seeing articles about people perishing due to company malpractice. Naomi steps in angrily, telling him she doubts anyone will even bother thawing and reviving him in the far future. However, the sick man is determined, and tells them he doesn't want to end up like his father, who surrendered to his illness little by little. With his mind made up, he asks them to be with him in his final hour, and his comment further saddens Naomi. Later, Marc stands alone by the ocean, diving into a whirlpool and submerges in total darkness before slowly rousing in a dazzlingly bright light. He stirs awake with blurred vision and voices of people calling out his name in excitement. Marc panics, so Elizabeth places an oxygen mask over his nose and mouth, while the others observe his vitals. Moments later, Marc finally sees his new self in front of a mirror. Drive West introduces himself and asks him how his body feels. When Marc says everything hurts, the doctor takes it as a good sign, and assures that the pain will subside eventually. Later, the reanimated man learns that his new body consists of cloned parts, bionic implants, and internal technology, and he's even connected to a mechanical mother via a detachable umbilical cord. Marc's new body is imperfect since he still had multiple body and organ malfunctions, which Drive West treated with more surgical procedures and medications. As he slowly adjusts to his new life, Marc relearns walking with the support of the doctors and his nurse. After his leg exercise, they take him to his new room, where Marc dreams of Naomi. The next day, while doing his hand exercises, Marc asks Drive West about the outside world. Suddenly, Dr. Gethers enters carrying a headgear device called the Mind Writer. Marc can use the device to record his memories, make art, or create reports. The female doctor wants the patient to use it to record everything about him, as people will want to know more after he's introduced as the first man ever to be revived. When Marc asks why anyone would want to learn more about him, Dr. West explains that people paid for his revival, so he needs to be ready when facing the media. As they give him a few seconds with the device, Marc is bombarded with memories that overstimulate his senses. Dr. Sarah warns his colleagues not to overexcite their patient, and then leaves for his office. However, Drive West encourages him to use it gradually to get used to the sensation of memories pouring out of his mind. The memories slowly progress into his parents, friends, and success in his career path. Then, it focuses on one woman, Naomi. Later, Elizabeth bed bathes Marc, when they have a conversation about the possibility of people choosing their children's features before they're born. The man asks about the nurse's life and is shocked to discover that sleeping with people with no emotions involved has become commonplace in the time period. Elizabeth even offers to sleep with him when he's more stable, much to the man's surprise. Waking up in the middle of the night, Marc walks to the mirror, when his image flashes into an old man. Terrified, Marc falls to the ground, setting off an alarm in his room. On the floor, Marc struggles to crawl back to bed as he remembers his youth when he could freely move his body. Struggling, Marc reaches his bed to connect with his cord. Then, Elizabeth runs to his side in a state of panic before he passes out. While out cold, he sees another memory of himself driving a car on a freeway as Naomi and her ex-boyfriend, Steve, sit in the back seat, laughing. The memory dealt some damage that concerns Marc, so he takes it up with his doctors. In the meeting, they discover that his memories are deteriorating, but advise him to continue using the Mind Writer. When he asks to be alone with Drive West, Marc finds out that because of his cancer and old age, the possibility of him returning to normal is close to zero, but he can gradually improve. The physician tells Marc that he should be proud of himself, as he's the start of a giant step toward a better future through this science. On his way to his room, Marc remembers a film regarding Jesus Christ reviving Lazarus, and likens his confusion and contempt for his revival to that of the reincarnated man from the Bible. As time passes, Marc progresses to exercising on a treadmill. Elizabeth tells him he'll be jogging soon, as he needs to train his new lungs to the environment's atmosphere. She starts kissing and hugging Marc, showing that she isn't just a nurse to him, but also his partner. Elizabeth covers his eyes, and the staff enters the room with a cake. They greet him happily, congratulating him on his 100th day. Then, they hand him a box containing his old belongings before cryostasis, which Marc rifles through. Inside, Marc finds a letter from Naomi. Seeing her letter, Marc reminisces about their relationship, starting from when they first met. The two met in college, where they maintained a years-long fling behind Naomi's boyfriend's back. However, when she finally breaks off her relationship to be with Marc, he begins to explore his options by dating other women, to Naomi's dismay. The cycle repeats over and over until Marc is diagnosed with cancer, prompting Naomi to finally confess her love, and stay with him for the rest of his remaining life. Yet, Marc chooses to be placed in a cryogenic state, preferring to end his life before his body deteriorates from the illness. That night, Marc lets Elizabeth read Naomi's letter out loud. He learns that Naomi also opted to be put in cryostasis when she was dying at 50, hoping to be reunited with him soon. Hearing this information, Marc asks the doctors for the location of Naomi's body, where he finds a disturbing scene, a room full of people frozen and waiting for reanimation. He also learns that reanimating someone costs a lot of time and money, and that he was chosen because he was in the best condition, since he ended his life before his disease took over. However, the doctors say they'll do their best to study Naomi's case, but can't fully promise that they can revive her. Later, Marc wonders if he had done the right thing, before recalling another blurry memory of him and Naomi at the beach. During their last fight, Naomi tells him that he doesn't care about anyone but himself, since he's disregarding her feelings when he decided to undergo cryostasis. Soon, Marc asks Elizabeth to shave his hair. Later, while Elizabeth prepares his medication stocks, he asks how many rehearsals occurred before he was revived. Elizabeth's reply causes the man to question the scientist's morality. So, she calms him down by saying that the doctors will find a solution to Naomi's illness in years to come. She insists that she has no idea about the previous test subjects, and that she's bound by a confidentiality clause. Soon, Marc grows increasingly anxious, which his assigned doctors and nurse immediately notice. Dr. Sarah warns the others that Marc is starting to depersonalize after his encounter with Naomi. Elizabeth speaks up about her fear regarding Marc's way of thinking, and suggests the patient be allowed to experience the outside world to unwind. However, physicians deny her proposition, fearing that his lungs aren't ready, and that it's too soon to expose him to the media. She asks them to be honest with Marc about his memory loss, but Dr. Sarah fears that his condition might worsen. Later that night, Naomi tempts Marc into sleeping with her as a distraction. Yet, it only further ignites questions in Marc's head about man's desperation for life after death. He's convinced that what people crave is what they'll lose after death. Seeking answers, Marc breaks into Drive West's room and takes mind writer chips about the test subjects before him. He discovers that every patient had adverse effects, some worse than others, from organ malfunction to induced self-harm. Much to his horror, Marc isn't the first to wake up, but the first to thrive. Soon, Drive West proudly makes a speech about their success in having finally reanimated a person, then presents Marc to a crowd of investors and reporters. As Lazarus comes into full view, the people are enamored by the concept of eternal life, leading to a standing ovation. After seeing the audience's reaction, West announces Marc and Naomi's love story, and promotes his next project. He informs them that their new focus will be on Naomi, aiming to reconcile the estranged couple. Observing from a distance, Marc gazes at him with disdain and resentment. Later, Drive West and Marc confront each other as the patient queries the physician about the concept of morality, convinced he's a creation of the doctor. West asserts that the Lazarus Project is now his purpose, and Marc must grapple with its consequences indefinitely. Acknowledging the truth, Marc returns to his bed while the doctor apologizes for being unable to alleviate his patient's isolation. Recalling a party where he professed his love for Naomi, Marc reminisces about dancing the night away with their friends. Realizing something from his memory, Marc wanders toward Naomi's resting place, questioning the soul and embracing the cryogenic chamber with a wistful gaze. Later, Elizabeth discovers him beside Naomi's cryogenic unit, inquiring about his well-being. Although he claims to be fine, his despondency is evident. Eventually, Marc shares his final thoughts from when he contemplated ending his life. The last few months were the most meaningful. He used death to escape the challenges of his illness, realizing cryostasis was just an excuse, and he never anticipated revival. Accepting death mattered most to him, and now, free from fear, the joy of living again lies in making Elizabeth smile. Despite his request for assistance in ending his life, Elizabeth vehemently refuses initially but eventually complies. In the following days, Marc records his remaining memories for the researchers. Later, Marc seeks the medication suggested by his nurse, reminiscing about a similar experience in the past. After taking the medication, Naomi was by his side until his final breath, guiding her on what to do with his body. In the present, Marc consumes the medication, slowly approaching Naomi's cryogenic chamber for a peaceful death, closing his eyes. Suddenly, a bright light flashes, and voices discuss their luck in finding him in time. Drive West apologizes for not sparking Marc's will to live and assures him they won't repeat the mistake. Marc realizes they will revive him again, denying him eternal peace.